Hello, 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 everybody. I'm here with Dr. Tauber. He is the clinical psychologist for the Center for Psychotrauma and Peace, which quite succinctly means that he helps people deal with difficult things. Trauma, correct me if I'm wrong, but trauma basically is any circumstance that is a little out of the ordinary and it's kind of making us anxious. And I think COVID-19, we did one basic interview, which was about coping, but this is a specific little interview, and the concept of the interview is to ask you, a lot of people, I think, especially I noticed, I mentioned before that I see it with older people, which unfortunately, everybody, I mean, obviously they're trying to stay safe. So they're staying home. But what I'm noticing is I feel that it's like people are getting a sense that this might be going on. I'm going to say the word, even though I don't like to say it, but they're thinking it's going to go on forever. How am I ever going to get out of this? And now you have an issue of, whenever you have, let's say, something that's difficult, but you know that you're going to get out of it. So, okay, I can get out of it. I mentioned to you before that the Jewish Agency put out a video from Natan Sharansky, and he was in prison for 9 years, and half of it was in isolation. He said he had no idea, God forbid, they could have killed him. He didn't know if he was going to get out of it. And yet his mechanism was he always felt that he's part of the Jewish people, something that's bigger than communist Russia, and therefore he felt connected even when he was isolated. And so it seems like there's this power, this ability to, even in isolation, feel connected. I don't know what your feelings on the subject are.
Absolutely. I agree with that. You need to feel connected to something. And you need to have goals in life. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who started up a type of therapy called logotherapy, the therapy of the meaning in life, said that there were three types of relationships and three types of goals in life. One is the goal of occupation or something that I'm doing. The other goal is the personal, so connection with people. And the third is a spiritual goal. And when we have those three kinds of goals in life, then I'm not saying we're set, but it helps a great deal. And if you can develop those things, for example, even with COVID, develop, say, a hobby, develop something you're doing, particularly something for other people, but like something like art or music or learning a language or gardening or I don't know what, but learning history. There are lots of things you can do. The other is the relationship with people, and that can be an intimate those can be intimate and social and more superficial relationships. And those relationships we can physically distance, but we don't have to socially distance. And that's, I think, the mistaken terminology that's being used. I don't like the term social distancing. I prefer the term physical distancing in that sense. We have Skype, we have Zoom, we have Viber, WhatsApp, all kinds of things. Mobile telephones. We have all kinds of ways of connecting with people, even email. But we can even personally, through Zoom, through Skype, through WhatsApp, connect with people. And be on a very personal level. Yeah, we can't touch them maybe, but we certainly can be in touch with them. And the third, and certainly not the least important, in fact, probably the most important, is what you were just talking about, the whole connection with the spiritual, with something bigger than us. Yeah, and those are the really important things right now.
So if I like to summarize what you're saying, basically what Viktor Frankl, who in fact the Rebbe was a big fan of his therapy, and the Rebbe was very well aware of all the different types of therapy. So the fact that he had a respect for him speaks a lot. And of course, many people came to Rebbe. So Viktor Frankl is saying that we need three goals, saying that we need basically like a work or hobby, we need relationships, and we need spiritual. And I think what you're saying is really such great advice because, you know, one of the things that Natan Sharansky did in prison was he would play chess with himself. And,
Sure.
you know, this idea, which is right now, I always like to boil things down to practical techniques. So right now, think about, okay, whatever your circumstances, you know, obviously, hopefully, let's imagine that either you have a job or that's not an issue. So you've got to carve out some kind of physical activity, something that you're kind of that thing that you're going to do. And for women, as the Talmud says, that women are always busy. Their minds are busy. Often the home is their occupation. Keeping the home neat, keeping it clean, that's something that they're quite proud of and happy to do. For a man, gardening could be an excellent, excellent hobby. I know a guy just came to our synagogue yesterday, and you know they were just probably going out of their minds. First time in 6 weeks, they just came for a little visit. So but that's what he does. He's retired and he gardens, and that keeps him busy. And he makes his potatoes and tomatoes and stuff like that. And you know that's a good goal. So the goal of something physical, the goal of interpersonal connection, and again, as we mentioned, I think that a lot of people are waiting for somebody to fall out of the sky and love them. Love is something that you choose to do. And love is a reaction to love. So here, you know, you mentioned something on Chabad.org. You reached out to someone, and I reached out to you, and now we've become friends because we set up a time once a week to connect. That's it. It's simple. And it's something that I've discovered in life is just reach out to people. Now, many times people don't reach out back, but you know what? Enough people will that you'll feel connected to them, and that's enough.
Exactly. And one of the things we're trying to do is to create groups, create mutual interest groups. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you mentioned Sharansky with chess. So why not get a chess group going? Why not get a davening group going? Why not get, I mean, there are thousands of different things that you could get going and have contact literally all day with people. There's no reason you couldn't. You may not be able to touch them physically, but you certainly can interact with them.
Yeah.
There's no reason. By the way, you mentioned a garden. It's funny because even though we have a big backyard here, I have a little garden right on the table next to my work table. So I filled a whole big table with plants, and I really like looking at it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Caring for the plants. It's not, but if you buy a couple of plants, with or without, it makes the room feel a lot nicer. I don't know. That's me. You could learn a language.
Yeah.
You could learn Yiddish. I'm sure there are Yiddish online courses.
Sure.
That sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And all of the, and now with the internet, so much is free. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to pay for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So you can spend your whole day doing it.
Yeah. I want to touch on what you spoke about spiritual, because obviously that's my field. So I just
Right.
want to give 2 suggestions on how you connect to God on a spiritual way now. And really, as Jews, I mean, we've been doing it for thousands of years. And this is really, really interesting. I don't know if you know this, but when this whole thing came out, there's a very popular, a very great rabbi, his name is Rabbi Yossi Jacobson. So he said that one of the Jewish commentators said that before Hashem built the Mishkan, before he told us to build the tabernacle, where he dwelt, sort of like the synagogue, the first synagogue was meant to be in the home. And because they sinned with the golden calf, therefore, and this is a very critical point, therefore it transformed into a building. Every single home, the Rebbe says, is a temple for God. In fact, even you're a temple for God. And God comes wherever you let him in. And so whenever you open up a siddur, a prayer book, for a man putting on tefillin, whenever you open up a Tehillim and you say the words, you're literally connecting heaven and earth, divinity and time and space and matter. And in fact, there's a story once where the Rebbe Marash, who was the 4th Chabad Rebbe, he took his 2 children, Rebbe Zalman Aaron and Shalom Defer, once they were on a vacation. They were going in a mountain somewhere. He said, over here, a Jew davened mincha 115 years ago. So those people with spiritual sight can see literally every word of connection to Hashem. And these things are so, so powerful. There was a doctor that came, a very brilliant guy, PhD, invented, he's written many papers. So one of his devices, and I actually did this device, it tremendously helped me. It's amazing. It's about, basically, it's from NASA research, how to put yourself in the alpha wavelength, literally within 6 sessions. He's done it with 17,000 vets, 50% success rate in healing post-traumatic stress disorder. Amazing thing. So I asked him, so how do you do it? He says, daven Shemona Esrei. If you every single day daven the Shemona Esrei, it has the ability to give you the tranquility. Everything you need is in davening. But most of us don't appreciate it. Certainly religious Jews, we do it almost by habit or it's an obligation. The greatest wisdom, the greatest profound spiritual connection we have. I remember, if I may, I was a rabbi in this little resort town. And we put up a big public menorah. And we daven mincha before. And so this is like in a mall somewhere. So there was a non-Jewish lady there. She's probably Christian. She probably did a lot of prayer herself. And our little mincha, the smallest of our prayers, she said that was the most spiritual prayer session I have ever seen. So we don't realize the levels of spirituality that have been transmitted for thousands of years. I mean, basically all spirituality comes from Judaism. And so therefore we have, first of all, the davening is tremendously powerful. The idea of the talus, you should actually put it over your head. And when you do it, just feel like you're in another space. It's so amazing. And the other thing is to learn Torah. There's no end of learning Torah. Whenever you learn Torah, it says it's like God and you are connecting, merging mind to mind, 2 fires, 2 flames coming together. So I think what you said from Viktor Frankl is so important, because life is always about a balance. You can't become too spiritual without practical. You can't become too practical without having connection. But here you have the 3 things. You have physical, you have interconnection, and you have spiritual. And you need all 3. Each one, fire feeds fire. You add 3 flames, you got a bigger flame. Each one helps the general individual. It's like the Baal Shem Tov says, you eat something, you feel a little like, oh, I just descended. Now I need some spirituality. But it's hard to maintain spirituality. So it's good to eat, because then you go down and up and down. And that up and down is what allows you to go forward.
There's another point to spirituality, too. You don't have to be with anybody else, at least in my mind, to do it. And you can do it online with other people. There's no reason you can't. There was a Chabad course last year, I think it was, maybe it was 2 years ago now, I can't remember, on Jewish spirituality and on Jewish meditation. It's somewhere around. And just by even breathing in and out and breathing in Hashem each time you breathe in, that also has a big effect. And I tried it and it works. At least for me, it works. So even if you're alone, you can get that connection. I'm not saying it's easy, but it does. But you can get it eventually. So what you're saying, and when we say the words to the prayers, we have to have the kavanah. We have to not only have the words themselves, but what is their meaning, and how do they really affect us? That's extremely important.
Yeah, that's so true. Whenever I daven and I mean, thank God I know Hebrew. People can do it in English, and I think about the actual meaning. It's like the difference between, I don't know, having a 10% effect versus 100% effect. There's no connection. It's like watching a movie with your eyes closed or your eyes open. It's
Exactly.
suddenly so meaningful because the words themselves have such value. That's the thing, is I think that maybe our minds are so, first of all, people have to get rid of the media. The media is just this negative force. They're listening to the news. It's making them freaked out. That itself traumatizes people.
Yeah.
And you just need to have a life. And the beautiful thing about the times we live in is that it's up to you. You don't want to be forced into anything, but you have the freedom. Never before has there been more freedom, more opportunity to have a life. Even as a rabbi, I can tell you, when I was a rabbi in a city, so you get maybe 10 people to a class, it was a success. Today with social media, I could easily hit 1,000 people a day. So now, does it have the same impact? Maybe not. But I know that I'm doing something meaningful. That's why, to be honest, that's why I do it. I do it for myself because, I obviously have a passion, but I do it because it makes my life meaningful. It makes me feel good that I'm doing something. Meaning in life is something that more than it feeds the other, it's feeding you. What kind of a life is a life without meaning? It's the most beautiful gift you have. But the only one that can make your life meaningful is you, because otherwise it's a gun to your head. It doesn't feel very good. So it's your job to figure out who you have to give to, how you're going to give to them, and do it. And there's nobody that can say, I have nothing to give. Because
No,
God made it that everybody has something to give.
absolutely. Something else you were saying about this time and doing things online. I can sit here in Vukovar and I can talk to you in the States, and I can have groups in the States. I have a couple of groups in Africa. I have a group in India. I have 2 groups here in other cities in Croatia, and I don't have to spend money and I don't have to spend my time traveling.
Amazing.
And so I can do far more groups in far more places and speak to far more people and have a far bigger effect than I would if I had to travel constantly. And I would be spending our organization's money. And I can preserve that money and use it for other things and get even more people to do what we're doing. One point I want to make here is that this connection is just so important. Do not isolate yourself. It is very, very bad for you psychologically and socially and and spiritually even, and in every other way if you isolate yourself. Keep the connection. And that's what I don't like about this language of social distancing.
Yeah, it's not a good language at all. It's a very stupid term.
It is a stupid term. and it's a very damaging term.
Yeah, very, very much so.
So physical distancing, fine.
Yeah.
Social distancing, no way.
Right, right.
Um, the other point with regard, and this is something that is continually going through my head as long as we're talking about all this, is to have this COVID thing in the perspective of other diseases and problems through the ages. Look at, for example, Ebola. Look at malaria. Something like 400,000 people died last year of malaria. Sorry, what? Yeah. Look at tobacco. 8 million people died
Wow.
last year
Wow.
of tobacco. Yeah. Look at it in terms of flooding. Right now, there is flooding, for example, in Kenya and in Congo. So I'm not saying what we're going through is easy. It isn't. It's not easy at all. But let's put it in perspective. HIV, there are tuberculosis, and we could be here all night. And I could.
Okay, let's focus now on the main point, which is helping the individuals who are feeling isolated to feel less isolated. And I think that first of all, actually putting things in perspective is helpful because knowing that you are lucky and fortunate. And one of the things I teach a lot and something that I do every day and it's helped me tremendously is every morning when I wake up, I thank Hashem for my blessings. And that immediately puts me in a positive mood. And I've seen it. Anybody that does that for 2 weeks will change their general attitude. Tell me if this is true. I just saw this yesterday that, I don't know if the guy, I mean, he was like kind of one of these motivational speakers, but he said that we have 50,000 thoughts a day, 40,000 of which are negative. Do you have any correlation?
I don't know about it, but I do know that it helps me when I say to myself, look, I've got a roof over my head. I'm getting enough food every day. I've got my dogs here for companionship. I have the internet, and you and I are talking right now. And every day I'll have, I don't know how many talks this way, and I have internet, and I can respond to people. So yeah, counting our blessings. And I have to remind myself of that sometimes. I can't deny that I have to. But it helps.
Yeah.
It definitely helps. And before I go, you do it in the morning. I do it also in the morning, but I also do it, for example, before I go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah, the Rebbe speaks about that. Very important. Before we go to bed, we have to thank Hashem. And this is critical. There's a very great rabbi, the Ramchal, who says that basically people can go through life as if they are like an actor on the screen, not aware that they can change the action. And when you actually sit down at night and you thank Hashem for what you have, suddenly you realize, because when you have something, you just don't take it, you take it for granted. And when I do it, it's always like, wow, I'm really lucky. I had such a good day. I had this, I had that. But if you don't do it, you just don't know that you're lucky. And if you don't know that you're lucky, you don't feel lucky. So what do you begin to feel? Well, that went wrong. And because we're instinctively upset about this, upset about that. Instinctively, people don't realize this, but we're jealous about that person and jealous about that person. And these things take emotional tolls on us. And in times that we need to strengthen our energy, you had spoken before about the importance of having positive energy in order to do these positive things, which is a big thing. I think, you have mentioned this another time, that people are suffering with depression. But the thing is that we are totally empowered, but it takes, I would sum up this conversation, it takes 2 steps. Step number 1 is know how lucky you are. And that is only through gratitude. Gratitude in the morning and gratitude at night. Every morning, remind yourself of every blessing you have. Every night, remind yourself about the blessings of today. And the
That's right.
second thing is what Viktor Frankl said is 3 positive goals. You have to have some kind of physical goal. You have to have some kind of interrelationship goal. And again, I want to stress this because a lot of people are in an epidemic of loneliness. Everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but half the world is just as lonely as you are. And they want your love as much as you want their love. So stop caring if they're going to reject you. Your job is to reach out. Now, there's a rule of every fisherman. You're not going to catch all the fish, but you just need to catch once in a, one in an hour is already enough. So if you reach out to people and you reach, I don't know, if you reached out to 10 people today, and there's so many ways to reach out, and you caught one friend, and with normal boundaries, don't go crazy. Everything has to have appropriate boundaries. Good, you've done it. You can reach out, make one friend a day. In a year, you'll have 365 friends. You won't know what to do with your circle of friends. And the third thing is spirituality. Spirituality can't be underestimated. We're actually spiritual beings. I have a friend, a psychiatrist, said that when we're spiritual, there are actually parts in our brain that light up. We are spiritual beings. Pardon?
Absolutely. You look at an MRI with contrast, and there are things that will light up.
Right. So our connection to God is real. It's necessary. And we gave 2 practical ways. There's Jewish prayer. Anybody can talk in any language. That's the essence of prayer. And then there's the Torah study, which also applies because we say for Gentiles, there's 7 Noahide laws. You go to asknoah.org. You can study, should study God's wisdom. Thank God he gave us amazing rabbis and teachers for thousands of years. Literally, they wrote the most amazing stuff. And I've mentioned this to you personally. Every morning I spend about 3 hours studying. And I do it for my own happiness. That's what makes me happy. I get the inspiration and I share that. It's like, you know what it is this world, this is what God says in the Torah, in the Bible. This is the Creator saying, see, I have placed before you life and death. So a simple question, what's life and death? It's not a different world. It's the same world, but it's the world that you're going to see. Some people allow imagery, media, the way others are looking to impress you because they're depressed themselves and they don't have that confidence. They allow that to be reality. So they're looking at death. A statue is dead. I saw Michelangelo's David. He's very beautiful, but he's dead. And then there's life. But life is something that beats in you, and you have to push it forward. Don't wait for life to come to you. If you're waiting for things to come to you, that's death. If you're pushing life out, your heart is beating, that's life.
Completely agree with you. The other thing you mentioned, what gives you pleasure. Tell you what gives me pleasure is listening to somebody, is hearing, not necessarily the tzaras, but the feelings of somebody else.
It's true. That's true.
We're teaching a group, and here, not teaching by giving a lecture, but getting the group going and listening to what everybody is saying and listening to these interactions. And when you listen to somebody else, that has an enormous effect on your own empathy. By showing your empathy, in reality, you're not just giving, but you're really getting. That's very important. And I would say to anybody listening to this video, try it. Try just listening, shutting up, just not talking very much, just listening to what the other person has to say and listening to the other person's feelings and empathizing with them. That's crucial.
That's really good. I never heard that before, but as you say it, it's so true. And I think part of the reason, I heard this once from a good friend of mine, the reason people like, let's say, going to a play is they like experiencing another person's emotion. Imagine you watched a movie and there was no emotion. So
Exactly.
actually, we love kind of human interest stories because we're experiencing another person. And what
Exactly.
you're saying is so valuable. I've never heard this before, but it's so true because it's obvious. When you just listen to someone, you're experiencing them. And
That's right.
people have the need. I have a friend of mine who's actually military intelligence. So they have a technique. I don't want to go too deep here, and I don't want to, but basically, their technique in military intelligence, they don't use any torture. All they really do is they're experts at shutting up. He says everybody has a story and they want to tell it. And
That's
this
right.
guy's amazing because he's sitting with you, and before you know it, he knows everything about you. He didn't say a word.
And you want to know another little secret? The best psychotherapists do exactly that.
Right.
Exactly.
It's amazing. And
Yeah, it's
so, yeah,
an amazing technique because if you sit there and you say to somebody, tell me about yourself, tell me about what's getting to you, and you use certain techniques, which we could go into, but uh, and the person opens up and the person tells you about him or herself, and they feel incredibly better afterwards.
yeah,
And that's one of the basic techniques. We know that, for example, and there's a lot of literature on this. Um, if you have a relationship with somebody, doesn't matter how much you've been trained as a therapist, if you just establish a relationship with somebody, something like 70 or 80% of the success of therapy comes into that establishing of the relationship and listening.
that's amazing.
Yeah,
So it's just about a relationship.
exactly.
That's
It,
amazing. And you know what? That is really the Hasidic way, which is that, as opposed to kind of in the past, there were these Talmudic academies, you had rabbis that were teachers, the Rebbes were friends.
mhm.
And because of that, I think it really empowered. It's not something that I speak a lot about, but I hear from my friend, the psychiatrist who's in that world, that like there's a big kind of shtick, there's always like these ideas in the secular kind of thinking that in a way, like the most successful Jews or most successful people in the world are Ashkenazi Jews. And they have these theories. Why is that? And I think, this is my theory, I don't know if I'm correct, but it actually comes from the Rebbes, because these were communities that had unconditional love from
No,
their Rebbes, so it made them feel empowered. And so it's such an amazing thing that you're saying, because what you're saying, and I know this is work that you do, is each one of us easily can become a therapist. And the way you become a therapist is by just being a real friend. A real friend is not somebody that talks. A real friend is somebody that listens. I want to hear you. And then the other person feels like he has a friend. And I
yeah,
see it so clearly that for people, even just to be kind of normal and socially adaptive, you need even maybe one person that
that's right.
looks at you like a person. Then you look at yourself like you're connected to humanity, and then you become a mensch.
Exactly, Zara. Exactly. We've dealt with a number of quote unquote psychiatric patients. And we've said, okay, no, you're not a patient, you're a client. That's point one. And point two, you've developed your own reaction pattern. So it's not, for example, post traumatic stress disorder, but it's post traumatic stress reaction. And you react out of your background, out of your personality, and all the rest of it. And if somebody treats you like a patient, and we have a few of those, you are going to act like a person. You are going to become institutionalized. And again, we have a couple of those. If you react to the person as a person, it may take a while because the person may have become institutionalized, but you will eventually get the person to come out of that and to react as a human being and as a person. The Finns are very good at this. There are a lot of things in Finland and Sweden about this.
Interesting. Interesting.
It's what we do. By the way, you mentioned this business of what we do. We call people barefoot therapists or peer supporters. And we've had a lot of success with it. Just people who aren't trained as psychiatrists or psychologists, but who do have obviously some basic knowledge and who do have some basic techniques. And people relate to one another better, in our experience, than they relate to a professional sometimes, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Why? Yeah, why? Because, for example, first of all, there's the stigmatization. It's not so much in the States, but in other societies, going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, oh, I'm crazy. Well, I'm not crazy, I'm just reactive. So people resist it, and it's stigmatized. The other point is, if you're working with other cultures, a person from that culture can relate to another person from that culture far better, say, than I can. And so we train people from those cultures and to work with other people from those cultures. By the way, if people are interested, they can look at our website. And it's called, what our technique is called pragmatic empowerment training. What you in effect are doing is you're empowering people to react with one another and to work with one another. And that's very important, especially, not especially now, always.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people need people. And I think that we have to appreciate our role more. I don't know what your thoughts on the subject are, but perhaps as there became, because we live, I mean, in the olden days, a city of 50,000 was a super metropolis. So you had villages, a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand was probably a big little city. Today you live in a city, the city that I live in has millions. And so I think that people don't have a sense, I see this very tragic to me on the younger generation. I don't even think they think they're part of society. I think it's like, you know, maybe the older generation, well, even if we came from different parts of society, even if we had an argument about what life should be, but we're all like, at least we're like, feel that I'm part of a society, maybe have a different, at least we feel connected, we're humans. I think it's almost like there are people today, there are kids today, they're like, they don't feel that society cares about them, that they matter to society. And I don't know if it's the internet or the way things have gone that has created this kind of deep sense of I don't matter, when in truth you matter so much that just as much as everybody matters to you, you matter to everybody.
That's right. And there's another side to this too, that we have become, and maybe this is my socialist background and bent, that we care about material things and we care about ourselves.
Right.
Far more than we care about other people and what's going on around us.
Right.
And I always come back to Hillel. I always come back to, you know, if I am not for myself, who is for me? If I am not for other people, what am I? And if not now, when? And that's basically the guiding principle of my life.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. So the other thing is that it's a value shift that we have to make. And that is that the value of life, and now is the good time to make this shift because it's so clear. The value in life is not in what you have, it's in the relationships and the giving and the meaning that you hold, right?
Yeah, who
So
you
what,
are,
huh?
who you are.
Yeah, right.
Your
The
mind-
value system that you have. And it's so clear. And I think the real reason that we get into these kind of predilections is that often you get, it's in a way, it's almost, it's a choice that people have to make. You know, leaders are always, don't really have what to offer. So they offer either some kind of narcissistic vision or maybe some kind of false utopia sometimes. And the bottom line is every person is part of Hashem's plan, and
That's right.
therefore you make a difference. And you know, maybe to conclude with the concept of Mashiach, which is that we say that the world is a balance between light and darkness. And
Mhm.
every little bit of light is brought down in Kabbalah. Very interesting. We're coming up to the passing of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Kabbalah. He says a fascinating thing. It's actually quite amazing when you think about it. Basically, there are two tendencies within everyone. There's the selfish tendency, and then there's the selfless tendency. We have tremendous capacity in both directions. Look, every selfish act was done by a human, and every selfless act was done by a human. And that was just like me. I could be that selfish, I could be that selfless. The thing is, he says, every time you do a selfless act, it's not how much you did. It's every single time, because God knows us. In a certain sense, our first disposition in this world is selfish. Because you're
Yeah,
born as a child, and a child doesn't have a choice. He has to become a recipient and a taker. And
that's
so
right.
then to grow out of it, like you were saying before, in order for you yourself to realize, I know in my life it took me a long time. Maybe I had a good life, so I was more of a receiver. But it took me a long time to realize, you know what? I'm at the stage now where I'm an adult and there are people that need from me. And so if I hand someone $20, that person in their eyes says, okay, well, this is a giver. He's a helper to me. And so you have to transition yourself into, yes, okay, of course I'm going to take, it's exactly what you said about Hillel. Of course I'm going to take care of myself. It's a natural instinct, which is healthy. But it's not about me. It's about
That's
who
right.
I become, which is a giver. And that's where the magic, that's where the joy is. And if not now, when? That's also really important because I see what happens is people sometimes, and I have friends, and this is my opinion. My opinion is that the wealthy people in the world are very good people and they give a lot of charity. But sometimes what happens is you become consumed in your reality. And it's not that you don't have a good heart, but the Rebbe says giving charity is not waiting for someone to knock at your door. It's knocking at someone's door.
Yes.
In other words, and Charles, you're a good example of that because, you know, you're a medical doctor, you could be making a lot of money, but here you are as a volunteer, you're helping out, you know, clinical therapy, and it's for free. But the point is, you're finding the problem. The Rebbe says, if you know there's a problem, you're the angel. And if you say, who am I? Angels are sent by God. You have Hashem. Hashem is with you right now. And just to really understand, if not now, when? And this is really serious because we're in a very critical time in human history. You know, we have everything in our power to have the most amazing future for everyone. Never before has it been better. And never before have we been more capable, like this virus, through stupidity, to, God forbid, wipe ourselves out. And so the choice that we all have to make now is to do what Hillel says, which is, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? If I'm only for myself, who am I? And if not now, when? And we believe that every time we make a single step forward,
Right.
like we were saying before, the three goals, Hashem takes you infinitely forward.
And I'll tell you something else I've learned. You never know for yourself what even a very small act will do. You can hear, I'm very surprised sometimes when I walk through the city here, and even just going to a restaurant and being courteous to a waiter. I remember about 2 years ago, I guess this was, in the local hotel. I heard another patron of the hotel really railing off at one waiter, just being completely discourteous. And I know this guy because I go into this hotel like every couple of days when it's open. Now they're delivering food to me, which is almost funny. But I went up and I heard this whole tirade, let's call it that. And I said to the guy, hey, that really wasn't nice, what he did. Please remember that I value you and that I really like the way you wait on me all the time. Nothing big, just a sentence, just being nice to the guy. Hey, you did a good job today. Very small, but it changed him, and he told me that later. And when you take a small act, a very small act, you don't know what the effects are going to be in the long run. Because this could have destroyed him. And the fact that I said something nice to him might have helped him over it. And when I surprise myself sometimes, because when I go to a group or when I walk in the city, and we've dealt with a number of people over the course of years, people say, hey, you remember that 10 years ago? It helped me now. So and the other point is Hashem works through us. That's the other thing to remember. If we open those channels, we can let Hashem in, we can let the light in. That's what Zvi Freeman goes on about all the time, too. Letting that light, that little bit of light, wherever it is, shine through and shine through us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. That Hashem, Hashem chooses good people for good missions. So it's like if you really perceive that anything that's going to happen positive will come through someone, and ironically negative as well. So Hashem hides himself through nature, through people, through interactions, because there always has to be freedom of choice. So it means that the person can experience this as a godly gift or just a random coincidence. So that means he's using us, like even this conversation, we have no idea, but maybe it will help someone, maybe it will affect someone, and it's worth it. I just want to conclude with something I saw yesterday, which I think really gets to the heart of this whole thing, and it's very powerful and very simple. And that is that there was a guy that I reached out to, and his father told me that the kind of psychological qualification that he had, or whatever you want to call it, was an undetermined diagnosis. So anyway, but I understood from a psychological perspective, his issue was that he was basically angry at society, and he was being malicious. And so the thing is, over many years, I've just reached out to him totally normally. And now he's a normal person. And I've done that with another person as well. Because if you understand that people, and this is sort of what you were saying before, this is critical thing. And I think Freud, in a way, psychology did a very big disservice by labeling people.
I agree with that.
Because when you label someone, instead of the person being in a temporary state based on a circumstance, I've been depressed before, I've had anxiety before, that was based on a circumstance. I wasn't born depressed and I wasn't born with anxiety. The thing is, most of us throughout a lifetime will have depression and will have anxiety, and it's circumstantial. And so just if the circumstances change, then the reality changes. And I've seen a study, 500 million person, this must be the largest study into mental health, that everything boils down to fear. And so when a person's in a state of fear, that creates a need for protection. And that creates a whole psychological mechanism. Instead of reaching out with love and joy, I push people away. That's why I understand a vet that is sleeping homeless. 50% of the homeless people, they're doing that out of choice. And I've having gone through, unfortunately, anxiety, I understand what that means. So you're so afraid of people. 5% of the American population has social anxiety. You see someone, you get heart palpitations. And so it's only normal to want to stay away. And so here's the thing. What I experienced when I went through my difficulty is actually nobody was there for me. And what does that mean, nobody? It means no one was mean, but no one was nice. There wasn't a single person. I mean, I reached out to some people. I had at least the insight of, and I was very fortunate with Jewish mysticism, other factors. But there wasn't one person in this world that had not that there weren't people that didn't care. There were people that cared, but they didn't understand what they had to do. All they had to do was treat me as if I didn't have a problem.
Yeah, and that's what we were getting at before, that people are not psychiatrically pathological, but they're having psychological reactions.
Right.
We don't talk about, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder, but we talk about post-traumatic stress reactions, plural, because everybody has his or her own reaction, depending on the incident, depending on the person's personality, education, how the person was raised. Now, there's one other point which you mentioned with regard to the fear, which I'd like to go into. I have a couple of clients who, not only one, who, for example, were abused as kids. A lot of people like that, unfortunately. And what do? They build walls around themselves. So even if somebody is offering love, even if somebody is offering attention, they can't get at it. Why? Because they're so afraid that they're going to get hurt again.
Interesting.
Lots of people like that.
Yeah.
Lots of people who build very, very thick walls out there. And to get through those walls takes a lot of persistence and a lot of patience. And if you're dealing with somebody like that, my advice is to keep at it. Because, and never disappoint them, and never promise things that you can't realize.
Right.
Very important.
That's so true. You're so vulnerable,
That's
and it's really something which is quite interesting, because those people that need the most love, often, people that are functioning on a happier level, they just don't see it. And because they don't see it, they can say one stupid remark that could spiral that person so badly backwards. And it's just, basically, we have to be sensitive. We have to be sensitive to the fact that people are sensitive.
That's right.
And we're, and I really believe that encapsulates Judaism. It encapsulates God, and it certainly encapsulates Jewish mysticism. And it's one word, it's sensitivity. Because insensitivity is, in a way, it's the dark side. It's what you were saying before. It's, I'm about a bigger house, more money. Not to say that those things intrinsically are bad, But if that's all you're about, that means you don't care about the person that doesn't have food. You don't care about the person that's an orphan. And so sensitivity is a direction in life. You
That's right.
are being sensitive. And I think this is very critical because when we're in bad spaces, we are more sensitive. We're more aware. But the problem is we're often too messed up to really be of really good use. Then when we're in good spaces, well, all we want is more fun. So now the focus, the point is that it's like you can be too kind of towards the fun side, too towards the anxious side. But the key is that when you're okay, remain sensitive to those that are not okay. And that's the
That's right.
key.
Completely agree with you. And be empathetic. And there's one caveat in here, and that is don't damage yourself.
Right.
Don't get so involved with somebody that you get secondarily traumatized. It's going to probably happen anyway to a certain extent, but have your own mechanism for getting your own feelings out, because otherwise you're going to destroy yourself.
Right.
Very important. We call it psychological supervision, but have somebody you can talk to about this.
Right. Right.
Especially if you're doing a lot of it, and especially in times like this.
Right.
Because it's very easy to get lost in it and to drown.
Right.
I speak from personal experience because it's happened to me a number of times.
Right.
I know as a professional how to get out of it and with whom to talk. And I have my own psychological supervisor
Mm-hmm.
with whom I speak once a week.
Mm-hmm.
But be careful, be a little careful.
Right. Right. So that's the thing. And I think that in summary, one of the most important ideas is the idea of hashgacha pratis, which means everything is divine providence. So if you
Yes.
want to know the mission that God has for you, I have a booklet on this, Discover the Meaning of Your Life. It's in the back of my Kabbalah Love book. It's an appendix, but it's also available on my website, KabbalahWisdom.org. But if you want to know the meaning of your life, it is right in front of your face. It's staring you in your face.
Yeah.
It's not the people you don't know, it's the people that you do know.
That's
And
right.
one of the techniques that I say is imagine who you would have appreciated help from, who would appreciate help from you. As a parent, your children. As a husband or a wife, your spouse. As a child, your parents. As a sibling, your brothers and sisters. As a friend, your friends. In other words, now that doesn't mean you get stuck in that circle, but Hashem, like one night I was, basically it was a very cold night, I was driving. There was a lady that was stuck in the side of the road. She had to, change her tire. So I stopped to help her. Why? Okay, why did God make me see that thing at that moment? So the point is that any moment that there's an opportunity, you go by, you see a guy who's begging for $1 or something. So there are two ways. A bunch of beggars. Or why did Hashem make me see this situation? Obviously, like you say, you can't drown, because if you drown, you're of no help to anyone. But you also have to kind of understand two things. Number one, my primary purpose is right in front of my face. And that's really true, because we're often so busy saving everyone else that we neglect those that really need us most. I like to think that life is like a circle. And the work that you have to do is in the circle that's closest to you. The next thing is in the circle out of that. If you succeed in that, you can do in the circle out of that. But you always have to maintain your circles. You never do an outer circle without doing an inner circle. And so that's the key. The key is to have these various circles, and then you're able to, obviously, with the concept of hashgacha pratis. So if something comes your way, you also have to balance it. Okay, if I'm going to take on this new project, at what expense, it's an outer circle, at what expense will that be to the inner circle? And is that what Hashem wants me to do if it's going to cause disruption? Because your first obligation of love and kindness is to the inner circle. And so, and I think if you look at life in that way, which is true, we all have these circles. You start with the inner circle and then a circle around that and a circle around that. This is the correct way of being giving, as long as you're a little bit flexible. There are times, there are emergencies, you have to stop, somebody's got a tire to fix. But as long as you're a little flexible in your knowledge of what's correct.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, so I want to thank you deeply. Any concluding thoughts?
Thank you for tonight. It was a good talk.
Okay, so I'm going to end the recording, and let's see here. Everybody's becoming a Zoom expert.